Captain Jack Donovan hated diplomatic missions. He hated the stiff uniforms, the stilted conversations, and most of all, he hated pretending to respect aliens who thought humans were glorified space monkeys with guns. Yet here he was, being shuttled toward the most important diplomatic summit in Earth's brief interstellar history. "Captain, we're approaching the Zilaxian flagship," his pilot announced. "You'd better straighten your tie." Jack glanced down at his rumpled uniform and shrugged. "They're lucky I'm wearing pants." The Zilaxian flagship, the Imperial Radiance, resembled a massive floating cathedral constructed by an architect with a severe crystal addiction. Its spires and arches caught the light of the nearby sun and fractured it into thousands of rainbow patterns that danced across the hull. "Subtle," Jack muttered, squinting at the ostentatious display. The human shuttle looked pathetically small as it entered the cavernous docking bay. A welcoming committee of tall, willowy aliens with iridescent skin awaited his arrival. Their expressions, if you could call the slight rippling of their face membranes expressions, suggested they'd rather be greeting a viral infection. "Captain Donovan," the tallest alien said, his universal translator giving his voice an insufferably posh accent. "I am Chief Protocol Officer Livex. We expected the human delegation hours ago." Jack stepped off the shuttle ramp and stretched dramatically. "Yeah, sorry about that. Had to stop and take some pictures of that nebula. You guys ever notice how it looks exactly like a human middle finger?" Livex's membrane rippled in confusion. "I do not understand the reference." "Don't worry about it. So, where's this big important meeting happening? I was told there'd be snacks." The protocol officer's membrane now rippled in what was clearly discussed. "The Galactic Council awaits in the Grand Convocation Chamber. It is the most sacred ceremonial space in known space, where species who have achieved true civilization gather to." Great, Jack interrupted, pulling out a small metal flask from his pocket. "Lead the way, Sparkles." As they walked through corridors that could have housed small cities, Jack mentally catalogued everything he saw. Despite his deliberately casual demeanor, his eyes missed nothing. He was, after all, humanity's last hope at this negotiating table. Earth's fleet was outgunned, outmanned, and dangerously low on resources after the recent skirmishes with the Zilaxian border patrols. The only reason Emperor Thraz'Kal had agreed to these talks was to formally accept Earth's surrender. Little did the Emperor know, surrender wasn't in Jack's vocabulary. Neither was diplomacy, really, but he was working on that one. The Grand Convocation Chamber lived up to its pretentious name. The ceiling arched hundreds of meters overhead, decorated with moving constellations depicting the expansion of the Zilaxian Empire. Representatives from 24 alien species sat in tiered seating around a central platform, where a single, ornate chair more of a throne really awaited the Emperor. "Your seat is there." Livex pointed to a small, uncomfortable-looking stool positioned significantly lower than all other seating. "Charming," Jack remarked, then promptly ignored the stool and leaned against a nearby column instead. The gathered diplomats began to whisper among themselves. A squat, amphibious creature with multiple eye stalks turned to its neighbor, a being composed almost entirely of interwoven vines, and made a sound like water going down a drain. "Yes," the plant being agreed. "They really are as uncouth as the reports suggested." Jack smiled and waved at them. A trumpet-like fanfare erupted from hidden speakers, causing Jack to wince. A procession of Zilaxian guards entered, their crystalline armor catching the light and reflecting it directly into Jack's eyes, which he suspected was intentional. "All rise for his supreme luminance, Emperor of the Zilaxian Concordat, Master of the 7 spiral arms, Keeper of the eternal light, Thraz'Kal the Magnanimous." The Emperor floated into the chamber on a hovering platform surrounded by a shimmering force field. Unlike his subjects, whose skin merely shimmered, the Emperor's epidermis sparkled with what appeared to be actual embedded gemstones. His head crest was twice as tall as any other Zilaxian's, and his robes would have made a peacock feel underdressed. Jack fought the urge to put on sunglasses. "Let the peace talks commence," the Emperor announced in a voice that somehow managed to boom and trill simultaneously. "Though I wonder what there is to discuss when the outcome is so inevitable." His gaze fell on Jack, and his mouth parts formed what passed for a Zilaxian smile. Jack grinned back. This was going to be fun. The human representative may approach the luminous presence, announced a Zilaxian official whose job apparently consisted of stating the obvious in an overly dramatic fashion. Jack sauntered to the center of the chamber, acutely aware of hundreds of alien eyes tracking his every move. He stopped a few paces from the Emperor's floating throne and gave a nod that couldn't possibly be mistaken for a bow. "Yo," he said. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. The Emperor's face membrane pulsated rapidly, which Jack had learned was their equivalent of raising an eyebrow. "You do not prostrate yourself before the Emperor," hissed Liu-Vex, suddenly at Jack's side. "Humans have a medical condition." "Our spines shatter if we bow to anyone we haven't had drinks with first," Jack replied without missing a beat. "Ancient evolutionary adaptation." "Very tragic." Before Liu-Vex could respond, Emperor Thraz'Kal raised a bejeweled hand. "We have studied your species, Captain Donovan. Your irreverence does not surprise us. It merely confirms what we already know: humans are not yet ready for the sophisticated dance of galactic politics." Jack scratched his chin. "Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about you folks. Except replace sophisticated dance with reality check." Another gasp, louder this time. A tall alien with tentacles for arms actually fainted. The Emperor's platform descended slightly, bringing him closer to Jack's level, though still noticeably above him. "You stand before the oldest continuous civilization in the known galaxy, human. We were building wormhole generators when your ancestors were still figuring out which end of a stick was better for hitting things." "And yet," Jack replied, "your border patrol ships seem to keep accidentally wandering into our territory and shooting at our colonies. Funny how that happens." A new alien stepped forward, this one resembling a humanoid with copper-colored skin and no visible nose, just breathing slits. "I am Velatan, diplomatic attaché to the Emperor's court. Perhaps we should move to the substantive issues rather than exchange pleasantries." Jack sized her up immediately, intelligent eyes, a posture suggesting military training despite her diplomatic role, and the subtle way she had just rescued both him and the Emperor from an escalating exchange. "Interesting." "Fine by me," Jack agreed. "Let's talk about the systematic encroachment on human space, the embargo on critical medical supplies to our outer colonies, and your military's charming habit of accidentally destroying our research vessels." Emperor Thraz'Kal waved a dismissive hand. "And a border disputes. Nothing more. The cosmos is vast and boundaries are fluid. Perhaps if humans understood the complex historical claims of the established galactic powers. Perhaps if the established galactic powers understood the concept of a map," Jack interrupted, "we'd have fewer disputes." Velatan cleared her throat, or whatever passed for a throat in her species. "The Concordat proposes a simple solution. Human worlds will remain autonomous, but under Zilaxian protection. A small military presence on your major planets, unrestricted passage through your space, and preferential access to your unique resources. So surrender with a fancy bow on top," Jack translated. "A hard pass." An insectoid diplomat chittered loudly from the gallery. "The human colonies occupy strategic positions along the Orion Spur. The Zilaxian Concordat cannot allow such critical territory to remain unregulated." "Unregulated?" Jack laughed. "We regulate ourselves just fine, thanks. Your species has been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. A floating gelatinous entity contributed. You cannot possibly comprehend the delicate balance of power that has kept peace for millennia. A peace that conveniently benefits everyone at this table except humans," Jack pointed out. The Emperor's patience was visibly thinning. "Captain Donovan, perhaps you misunderstand your position here. You are not being invited to negotiate. You are being given the opportunity to accept our generous terms with dignity." Jack looked around the room slowly, taking in the smug expressions of the assembled diplomats. "Let me be crystal clear, Your Sparkly Majesty. Earth does not surrender. Not to you, not to anyone. Then you will be annihilated," the Emperor stated matter-of-factly. Your species will become yet another footnote in the long history of those who failed to recognize the inevitable course of galactic evolution. Jack shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe you've never faced a species quite like humans before. Is that a threat? The Emperor asked, his voice dangerously soft. Nah, Jack replied with a casual smile. Just an observation. Humans are like cockroaches, you know cockroaches. Little bugs from Earth. They survived every mass extinction event we ever had. Scientists say they'd even survive nuclear war. Incredibly hard to get rid of once they settle in. The chamber erupted in outraged exclamations. Vela tried to interject, but Jack was on a roll. And here's the thing about humans that you all seem to miss. We don't need to be stronger than you. We just need to make victory cost more than you're willing to pay. The Emperor's platform rose higher, a clear power move. This meeting was a courtesy, Captain, one that you have thoroughly squandered. These peace talks are. Hold that thought, Jack interrupted, much to everyone's horror. I haven't played my hand yet. The grand convocation chamber had gone deathly silent. Even the Emperor seemed momentarily stunned by Jack's audacity. In the thousands of years of Zilaxian diplomatic history, no one had ever interrupted the Emperor mid-sentence. Jack, appearing completely oblivious to the magnitude of his offense, glanced around the room. You know what? These boots are killing me. I'd been standing all day. With deliberate slowness, he walked over to a small ceremonial table positioned in front of the Emperor's floating throne. The table was carved from a single piece of crystal and was rumored to contain the actual solidified tears of the first Zilaxian Emperor, literally priceless and unquestionably sacred. Before anyone could react, Jack hoisted himself onto the edge of an adjacent platform, leaned back, and planted his scuffed, military-issue boots directly on the sacred table. The sound that followed defied description, somewhere between a collective gasp and the horrified shriek of 1,000 souls witnessing the end of the universe. Several diplomats actually fell from their elevated seats. The plant-based delegate immediately withered several of its tendrils. Much better. Jack sighed contentedly, wiggling his toes inside his boots. Emperor Thraz'Kal's face had gone from its normal pearlescent sheen to a deep, throbbing purple. The gemstones embedded in his skin actually cracked, and a thin wisp of smoke rose from his head crest. You dare. The Emperor's voice boomed with such force that the crystal fixtures throughout the chamber vibrated. In over 10,000 years of galactic civilization, no being has ever. Yeah, Jack interrupted again, examining a scuff on his boot. I'm the worst thing to happen to your fancy table since the invention of drink rings. Can we get back to the actual issues now? Vela Tarn had gone completely still, her copper skin now ashen. Captain Donovan, she whispered urgently. Do you have any idea what you've done? The table contains the solidified essence of Emperor Thraz'Kal. It is the most sacred object in the entire Concordat. Jack looked down at the table, then back at Vela with an expression of exaggerated shock. No kidding? Her. Well, old Kral makes a pretty comfortable footrest, I'll give him that. The insectoid diplomat had curled into a defensive ball. The gelatinous entity had solidified in apparent shock. Even Lear Vex, the protocol officer, seemed to have entered some kind of catatonic state. Emperor Thraz'Kal descended from his floating platform until he hovered just inches from Jack's face. His voice was now dangerously quiet. Remove your feet. Jack tilted his head, as if considering the request. I'm thinking, no, not until we discuss actual terms that don't involve humans becoming your newest pet species. The Emperor's personal guards moved forward, their crystalline weapons humming with energy. The tension in the room could have powered a small star. You will be executed for this sacrilege, the Emperor hissed, and your planet will be made an example of what happens to those who disrespect the Concordat. Jack didn't flinch. Instead, he actually reclined further, making himself more comfortable with his boots still firmly planted on the sacred table. That would be quite the diplomatic incident, wouldn't it? Executing an official representative during peace talks. I don't think your allies would approve. He nodded toward a group of amphibious diplomats who were indeed looking uneasy. The Aquarian Federation has been looking for an excuse to renegotiate their protection treaties with you. Killing me would give them the perfect opportunity to demand better terms. The Emperor froze, his gaze darting briefly to the Aquarian delegates, who suddenly found the ceiling extremely interesting. And, Jack continued, his tone conversational but his eyes hard as steel, if anything happens to me or to Earth, well, remember those cockroaches I mentioned? You'll find out exactly how much damage a cornered human civilization can do before you wipe us out. Ask the Kroll how that went for them. A murmur went through the chamber. The Kroll incident was still fresh in galactic memory, a technologically superior species that had underestimated human resourcefulness and had suffered catastrophic losses before eventually subduing a small human colony. The victory had cost them 3 capital ships and their homeworld's moon. This meeting is adjourned, the Emperor announced abruptly. The human will be escorted back to his vessel. So soon? Jack replied. And here I was just getting comfortable. As the guards approached, Jack finally swung his feet off the table and stood up. He gave the sacred relic a little pat. Good talk, Emperor. Looking forward to round 2. As Jack was escorted out, he caught Vela's eye. She was staring at him with an expression that combined horror, disbelief, and unless he was imagining it, the faintest glimmer of respect. The moment the doors to his temporary quarters slid shut, Jack's casual demeanor evaporated. He ran a hand through his hair and let out a long, controlled breath. Calculated risk-taking was one thing, courting galactic war was another. A chime at the door interrupted his thoughts. Enter, he called, instantly resuming his carefree posture. Vela Tarn strode in, her copper features arranged in a mask of diplomatic neutrality. The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss. Have you completely lost your mind? She asked without preamble. Jack grinned. Hello to you too, Vela. Come to arrest me? If it were up to the Emperor, you'd already be experiencing the vacuum of space without the benefit of a spacesuit. She paced the room, her movements tense. Do you have any idea what you've done? Established a negotiating position, Jack replied simply. Vela stopped pacing and stared at him. By desecrating our most sacred relic, by demonstrating that humans won't play by rules designed to keep us at a disadvantage. Jack's voice was suddenly serious, all traces of the buffoon gone. Your Emperor never intended to negotiate in good faith. The seating arrangements, the deliberately uncomfortable accommodations, the constant reminders of our technological inferiority, it's all textbook psychological manipulation. I've seen better setups in backwater casino poker rooms. Vela's eyes narrowed. You're not actually a diplomat, are you? Former special forces, recruited for diplomatic service after the Arcturus incident. Jack shrugged. Turns out the skills overlap more than you'd think. And the boots on the table? That was a calculated move. Her tone suggested she found this hard to believe. Jack walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. 3 weeks ago I was briefed on this mission by Earth's Security Council. Let me show you something. He tapped his wrist device, and a holographic recording appeared between them. The image showed Jack in a sterile conference room with several serious-looking officials. Captain Donovan, a grey-haired woman in the recording said, "This mission is unlike any diplomatic assignment we've given before. Conventional diplomacy has failed with the Zilaxians." "So what am I supposed to do?" Recording Jack asked. "Flip them off and hope for the best." Another official leaned forward. "We need you to break protocol. Specifically, we need you to commit a cultural transgression severe enough to shock them, but not so severe as to justify immediate military action." "You want me to insult them?" "We want you to reset the playing field," the woman corrected. "Our xenoanthropologists have been studying Zilaxian culture extensively. They believe the Zilaxians respect strength and audacity above all else, despite their obsession with protocol. They've become complacent after millennia of diplomatic dominance." A third official added, "Captain, there's a specific incident in Zilaxian history where an upstart faction leader put his feet on the first Emperor's personal table. Instead of executing him, the Emperor recognized his boldness and eventually made him a general." "So you want me to?" Put my feet on a table, recording Jack asked incredulously. On a very specific table, the woman confirmed. If our cultural analysis is correct, it will force them to see humans in a new light. If we're wrong, well, war was coming anyway. The recording ended, and Jack turned back to Vela, whose expression had shifted from disbelief to thoughtful consideration. You knew about the table of Kral Thuz, she said slowly. You knew its significance. We did our homework, Jack confirmed. Just like we know that the Zilaxian Concordat is far less stable than it appears. The Aquarians are restless. The Centauri coalition is secretly building up their fleet. And the Emperor's own cousin is gathering support for a challenge to the throne. Vela's breathing slits flared in surprise. How could you possibly know? A soft knock at the door interrupted them. When it slid open, a younger Zilaxian entered, his crystals significantly less impressive than the diplomatic staff's. Diplomatic attaché Tan, he bowed formally. The Emperor requests your presence. Thank you, Crix, she replied. As the young Zilaxian turned to leave, Jack called out to him. Hey, Crix, right? Quick question, what did you think of my performance today? Crix froze, clearly terrified of being addressed directly. He glanced at Vela, who nodded permission. It was. Crix seemed to struggle for words, unprecedented. But, Jack prompted. But Crix continued reluctantly. There are some among the younger Zilaxians who believe our civilization has become rigid, too bound by tradition to adapt to a changing galaxy. Jack smiled. Interesting. And the incident with the table? Crix's face membrane rippled in what might have been the Zilaxian equivalent of a suppressed smile. It is already being shared on our communication networks, with varying interpretations. After Crix left, Vela turned to Jack with new understanding in her eyes. You're creating division within our society. No, Jack corrected. I'm exposing division that was already there. The Zilaxian Concordat has ruled through tradition and intimidation for too long. The galaxy is changing, and Earth's emergence is just one symptom of that change. And you believe the Emperor will actually negotiate now? Jack's smile returned, confident but no longer mocking. I believe he's currently reassessing everything he thought he knew about humans. And that's a start. The grand convocation chamber looked different when Jack returned the next day. The seating had been rearranged into a circle, with no position clearly dominant. Jack's stool had been replaced with a proper chair. Most noticeably, the sacred table had been removed entirely. Emperor Thraz'Kal entered with less ceremony than before, his platform hovering at a height equal to the seated delegates rather than above them. His gaze immediately found Jack's. Captain Donovan, the Emperor began, his voice carefully modulated. After consideration, the Concordat has decided to approach these discussions with fresh perspective. Jack nodded respectfully, a gesture that wasn't lost on the assembled diplomats. Earth appreciates the opportunity for genuine dialogue. Vela, seated to the Emperor's right, suppressed what might have been a smile. Beside her, Crix stood with several datapads, his posture suggesting he had been promoted overnight. Before we commence, the Emperor continued, I must acknowledge an occurrence that has caused some discussion among my people. A ripple of anticipation moved through the chamber. Your actions yesterday were deeply offensive by our standards, Thraz'Kal stated. Yet, they have reminded us of our own history, when the Zilaxian Empire was young and bold. There is a saying among our ancient texts, the greatest insult, properly delivered, can become the highest compliment. Jack fought to keep his face neutral. The xenoanthropologists back on Earth deserved a raise. In that spirit, the Emperor continued, we are prepared to discuss terms that acknowledge humanity's unique approach to galactic affairs. The insectoid diplomat chittered in protest. Your luminance, surely you cannot be considering legitimate negotiations with these primitives after such disrespect. Before the Emperor could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. Perhaps the question isn't whether humans deserve respect, but whether they've earned our attention. All eyes turned to a reptilian figure who had remained silent yesterday. Ambassador Drex of the Saurian meritocracy, a civilization known for valuing actions over words. The human captain did what none of us have done in centuries, Drex continued, his scaled skin shifting colors as he spoke. He disrupted the comfortable patterns we've all fallen into. If nothing else, that deserves consideration. The Aquarian Federation agrees, burbled the amphibious delegate. Fresh perspectives prevent stagnation. Jack watched as the chamber divided before his eyes, the older, more established powers bristling with indignation, while the younger and more dynamic civilizations seemed energized by the disruption. The Emperor, meanwhile, observed it all with calculating eyes. Perhaps, Jack suggested into the growing debate, we might discuss the actual issues at hand. Border security, trade routes, technological exchange. Indeed, the Emperor agreed, seeming relieved to move away from the philosophical discussion. Let us begin with the matter of the Orion Spur transit corridors. For the next few hours, actual negotiation took place. Jack presented Earth's positions firmly but fairly, accepting compromises where they made sense and holding firm where they didn't. The Emperor, to everyone's surprise, engaged thoughtfully rather than dismissively. During a brief recess, Jack overheard a conversation between two aides that confirmed his suspicions. The boots incident had gone viral throughout the Concordat, with younger Zilaxians viewing it as a refreshing challenge to ossified traditions. The Emperor was now walking a fine line between maintaining authority and appearing progressive enough to appease the reform-minded factions. As the delegates reconvened, Vela approached Jack quietly. "There's another factor you should be aware of," she murmured. "The Kroll representatives have been notably absent from these proceedings." Jack frowned. "I assumed they weren't invited due to their conflict with Earth." "They were invited," Vela confirmed, "but my sources indicate their delegation never left their homeworld. Something about an internal security matter." The implications were clear. The Kroll, Earth's most aggressive adversary in the galaxy, were experiencing problems that kept them from attending a critical diplomatic summit. Problems that coincidentally arose just as Earth was making its bold diplomatic play. Jack made a mental note to inquire about certain covert operations he wasn't supposed to know about when he returned home. The afternoon session had just begun when the chamber doors burst open. A Zilaxian military officer rushed in, his crystalline armor dulled with what appeared to be scorch marks. "Your Luminance," the officer gasped. "The Kroll battle fleet has entered the system. They're demanding the human representative be surrendered to them immediately." The chamber erupted in chaos. Jack caught the Emperor's eye and saw something unexpected there, not fear, but calculation. "It appears," Thraz'Kal announced, raising his voice above the din, "that some parties prefer not to see these negotiations succeed." Jack stepped forward. "Your Luminance, the timing is suspect. The Kroll have opposed Earth's inclusion in galactic affairs from the beginning." "Indeed," the Emperor agreed. "And now they threaten the sovereign space of the Zilaxian Concordat to pursue their vendetta." The subtext was clear. The Kroll had overplayed their hand. By threatening the Concordat directly, they had inadvertently given the Emperor the perfect opportunity to align with Earth without losing face. Perhaps, Jack suggested, this represents an opportunity for the Concordat and Earth to demonstrate a united response to aggression. The Emperor's face membrane rippled in what Jack now recognized as amusement. "Captain Donovan, I believe you and I might finally find something we agree upon completely." 3 days later, Jack stood at the viewport in his quarters, watching the last of the Kroll warships limp away from Zilaxian space. The combined Earth-Zilaxian defense had been devastating, not because of superior numbers, but because of the shocking effectiveness of human tactical systems when integrated with Zilaxian weapons technology. The door chimed, and Jack didn't need to turn to know who it was. Enter. Enter. Emperor Thraz'Kal himself glided into the room, an unprecedented honor that had sent Lirvex into what Jack assumed was the Zilaxian equivalent of apoplexy. "Captain Donovan," the Emperor acknowledged, "or should I say, Ambassador Donovan." Jack turned, raising an eyebrow. "That's news to me." The treaty will be signed tomorrow, Thraz'Kal stated. Human colonies will retain their sovereignty. The Concordat will open its markets to Earth goods, and a formal military alliance will be established against Kroll aggression. Not bad for a week's work, Jack replied. The Emperor's membrane rippled in amusement. Indeed. Though I confess I am curious about something. Just one thing. I find that hard to believe. The incident with the boots, Thraz'Kal clarified. You knew about General Thraz'Kal's rebellion against the first Emperor. You knew that by putting your feet on that table, you were invoking one of our most controversial historical moments. Jack shrugged. We did our homework. Yes, but there's something else, the Emperor continued. What you may not know is that I am a direct descendant of Thraz'Kal. His bold action 10,000 years ago led to the modernization of Zilaxian society and eventually to the creation of the Concordat itself. Jack's poker face slipped for just a moment. That detail hadn't been in any of his briefings. So you see, the Emperor continued, when you put your boots on that table, you didn't just commit a sacrilege. You reminded me of my own heritage of the value of bold disruption. Happy coincidence, Jack offered. Is it? The Emperor floated closer. Or did Earth intelligence somehow discover my lineage? Did you plan to appeal specifically to me, rather than to Zilaxian culture in general? Jack said nothing, but his slight smile was answer enough. Remarkable, Thraz'Kal murmured. In all my centuries I have never encountered a species that combines such apparent primitiveness with such cunning. We're full of surprises, Jack agreed. The Emperor's next words were unexpected. I have been considering a tour of human worlds, an official state visit, to cement our new alliance. Jack couldn't hide his surprise. That would be unprecedented. As was a human putting his boots on the table of Kral Thuz, Thraz'Kal countered. Yet here we are, better for it. After the Emperor departed, Vela entered, her copper features alight with excitement. It's done, she said. The treaty is finalized. Earth is officially recognized as a sovereign power within the galactic community. Mission accomplished, Jack agreed, allowing himself to relax for the first time in days. There's something else, Vela added. I've been assigned as the permanent Zilaxian ambassador to Earth. It seems the Emperor believes someone who can tolerate you might be valuable in maintaining the peace. Jack laughed. Tolerate me? I thought we were becoming friends. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Captain, she replied, but her tone was warm. Later, as Jack's shuttle prepared to depart, he received one final transmission from the Zilaxian flagship. It was Creeks, the young aide. Captain Donovan, the young Zilaxian began. I thought you might like to know that putting one's boots on the table has entered our cultural lexicon practically overnight. It now refers to a bold action that disrupts established patterns but ultimately leads to positive change. Jack couldn't help but smile. Take care, Creeks. Something tells me you'll go far in the new Concordat. As the shuttle broke away from the massive Zilaxian vessel, Jack finally allowed himself to reflect on the events of the past week. What the Emperor would never know, what no one outside Earth's highest military command would ever know, was that Jack had been selected for this mission not despite his unorthodox personality, but because of it. Earth had gambled everything on a cultural hack, a psychological operation masquerading as a diplomatic faux pas. They had studied Zilaxian history, identified a cultural pressure point, and deployed exactly the right kind of disruption at exactly the right moment. Jack opened his secure communicator and typed a brief message to Earth Command. Mission accomplished. The boots worked. Humanity has officially arrived on the galactic stage. God help the galaxy. As his shuttle accelerated toward the rendezvous point with the Earth fleet, Jack couldn't help but put his feet up on the shuttle's dashboard. Some traditions, after all, were worth keeping.